I would like to start this session, which I call Breathing Life into Your Life's Work, with an example of how the breath helps you be resourceful, how the breath can help you energize the work that you do, and before, during, and after your workday. So let's start with just a simple awareness of how you're breathing right at this moment. Watch your inhale and your exhale. And just notice how you're breathing at this moment. This is the way that you're putting life into your body. This is the way that you support yourself every minute of the waking and sleeping day. And just notice how you're doing it. Okay. Now I'm going to ask you to see what you need to do in order to make that breath feel more easy and pleasurable. Whatever it is, changing your thinking, changing your posture, changing your attitude, what is it that you can do to allow your breathing to feel more easy and pleasurable to you right now, at this moment? Okay, just make note of that. Now, do the opposite. This may seem counterintuitive, but it's part of the experiment. Do the opposite right now and see what you need to do to make your breathing more difficult and less pleasurable. Go ahead and try that now, just for a moment, what you need to do to make your breathing less easy and pleasurable. Okay, enough of that. Go back to letting the breath be easy and just note how you spend most of your day. Now, obviously, we don't spend most of our day tense and trying to make our breathing difficult, but unconsciously we can slip into that posture and those thoughts and those attitudes. And when we do, well, notice how creative and how resourceful you feel. So breath awareness, which is always the first step in using breath modulation to increase creativity, to increase the sense of joy and connectedness in life, always starts with, first of all, being aware of how you're breathing. Then you can do something about it. Okay? So I have been in the world of self-employment for over 40 years.
Yeah.
And I've had to start every day of my life preparing myself for how I could be most effective, more creative, and useful. And I noted that how I went into the day made a great difference on the results that came out at the end of the day. And then how I reminded myself throughout the day to keep myself resourceful, not get stuck in a position, not take an attitude towards a customer or a client and freeze, as it were, because this is what happens naturally to us throughout our day, is when our thoughts or attitudes are triggered about something that seems to be a challenge, or we have difficulty in seeing our way through an issue, or feeling confident in a relationship, it's immediately recorded in how we breathe. Now, breath is not the secret to give you all the answers to know what horse to bet on in the 5th race at Pimlico or something. But what it does is it frees up your energies to flow more easily and consequently be more resourceful. So you don't get stuck in a certain attitude or position.
I think that's really beautiful, because one of the things we very much love to experiment and share in our podcast is about positive flow. And I could really feel that when you just directed us to be in that awareness, you know, where your breath is at the moment and what's happening, but it just shifted just like that. It was just amazing, you know, how just, you know, taking your focus into your breath can be so powerful. And, you know, how that then makes the flow go better. I don't know how you experience that, Sue, because for you,
Yeah,
obviously, this is perhaps more new.
I was smiling because I realized when I became aware and, you know, adjusted to make it more pleasurable, I was smiling. So I was smiling because I was smiling and closed my eyes, and it just felt joyful, really, really joyful, beautiful. And to your point, Jim, when we tried the opposite of the experiment of, you know, trying to make the breathing not pleasurable, I sort of tensed up, and I thought, that's probably how in the past or probably still, you know, for perhaps a number of hours during the day, you know, perhaps hold myself. This, you mentioned freezing, that sometimes we freeze, and it's just that awareness of that shift between the two is just so powerful to really observe that for ourselves.
Absolutely. And like any habit, especially the habit of breathing, since we've been doing it since day one of our life, to change a habit like that takes conscious intention and practice, like any skill. And so when I first started breath awareness and breath modulation, I reached the conclusion I was getting worse. It seemed like I was holding my breath much more than I normally do. It seemed like I was falling. Well, I soon came to realize I was just becoming more aware of what I was doing most of the time. I was not actually getting worse. I was just becoming cognizant of the times that I would unconsciously start to tense. And we all have a built-in mechanism neurologically called the startle response. For example, if there were a great big sonic boom right now that rocked Great Britain and the United States, and we'd all have the same response. Unconsciously, we wouldn't be able to do anything about it. It's called the startle response. And it's a protective mechanism for the human organism to orient itself when danger is present, so it knows what to do. And believe it or not, it starts with holding your breath, being aware, looking around, and seeing, do I fight or do I flee? But as soon as I make that decision and go into action, my breath is freed up. As a matter of fact, there's more oxygen available. However, many of us in the Western culture, I would say in particular, but probably the whole world now, many of us are hypervigilant most of the time, continually looking for what could go wrong, what could be dangerous. And it puts us in a 24/7 state of startle response. We don't think of it. None of us would want to do that. But to the organism say, I'm prepared for anything. I'm on the lookout. I'm watching out for trouble. I'm having a conversation with a client. I'm being aware of them. Are they starting to take this conversation into something that would be a disincentive to buy my product? And I've got to be, well, all of that actually drives people away.
Yeah. Is
all
that the reason why we then, because one of the things I've learned that obviously we talk about ecstasy and joy, for business world. And I've noticed that lots of people, and including me, myself, it's quite difficult to allow joy, that it kind of, is that a nervous system response then? Is that, because I know you obviously have a wealth of experience, having been a psychologist and breath worker for decades, and you've done lots of good for humanity through such a kind of seemingly simple thing as breath. But you're also very knowledgeable about nervous system. So is that the, the nervous system response then, that people don't allow? They've got used to, at least in Finland, we have this saying that there is always a cry after a lot of joy. And it's kind of as if you don't allow yourself to be in joyful state, and you're just all the time aware that something horrible will happen. Like, you get that startled response when you watch a film and there's something beautiful happening, and you're kind of all the time waiting that, oh, something will happen horrible, something will go wrong. So is that just normal? Is it a nervous system response, or is it something that we've been conditioned to? And especially if we take it to business, people are so stressed out at the moment. Lots of people are burning out. You can't have happiness and joy at your workplace. So is it just being able to self-soothe and self-regulate yourself through breath and breath work that would be the key for more joy and happiness? Or is it kind of predetermined by our nervous system, or genetics, or
well,
cave times?
actually, and it's some of both. It's never one or another. The fact is, we are born with a certain neurology that has been developed over millennia. And in the middle of the brain, there is a complex of organisms that are called the default mode network. And the default mode network has been known colloquially in the area of meditation and self-improvement as the monkey mind. And the default mode network is, for the most part, quite self-reflective and self-referential, and is programmed to look for survival. Okay? And when we are not focused on a positive task, we automatically, neurologically, go back to the default mode network. And if that default mode network is especially programmed for anxiety, for I don't see danger, but I just don't feel relaxed. Something could happen at any time. The good news is that we can change the underlying functioning of that default mode network. It has been shown that people, for example, who are long-term meditators, who choose to focus on something positive or something neutral, over a period of time, have actually changed the neurology in their brain. And so they less quickly go into self-referential negative thinking. They have trained themselves to do that. We all can do that. And it's not necessary that we spend hours meditating, but it is necessary that on a daily basis, we continue our awareness and continue our practice of redirecting ourselves to the thoughts that we want rather than the thoughts that are programmed in. It's been said that we are all survivors of the tiger,
Yes.
meaning
Yeah.
that we're the ones that didn't get eaten. And so our genes have propagated the planet, and it's supposed that the ones that survived were the ones that were more vigilant than the others.
Yeah, so Jim, I'm just thinking, you know, in the world that we live in at the moment, where there's obviously a lot of sad and, you know, news and doom and gloom, I think that's definitely something to celebrate, that we've all survived the tiger, and and you know, which are obviously very beautiful creatures. But I'm really, really fascinated, you know, about your why. You know, clearly you're a psychologist, you've been self-employed for 40 years, you've done this amazing transformational work in breathwork. What's your why? What was the thing that actually decided you? What's the thought that led you to focus on working with the breath, which obviously is about you know, which we all need. It's one of our fundamental first basic need.
Yeah. Well, I was, from an early age, decided that I wanted to work with people. And there was a sense of wanting to help, to interact in a helpful way with people. So I chose going into psychology because I also had kind of a scientific bent. You know, I liked, or did okay, and actually liked science. But I didn't want to just be experimental psychologist and watch rats run around in a maze. I wanted to work with people. So I became a clinical psychologist. And I was trained in a very forward-thinking and humanistic style of working with people. But at the end of 4 years of education and a year of internship, I was done. Something didn't feel right to me about it. And I was not going to be a talking head, even though this is in the podcast, this is what it looks like we all are, talking heads. But I decided I was not going to sit in an office. And even though it was exciting to meet new people and to help them with their problems, just sitting there and talking about it all day long, something wasn't right. Because for me, what produced a greater sense of joy in my life is when I was out in nature, and when I was playing sports, and when I was doing things that my body was involved in. And when the body was involved, now I didn't think of this particularly at the time, but when the body was involved and I was enjoying it, I was breathing. You know, my breath was a lot freer than when I was sitting in an office trying to focus on what a person's problems were. And even as I'm saying this right now, you can hear my voice and you can see my body tensing up. You know, it's like, so I left after completing my PhD. My wife and I got on the plane and went to Africa.
Wow.
Went back to the roots of civilization. It's like, and there in the desert of Africa, I was enlightened to go back and get connected with the earth. And we planted gardens and, you know, but still there was that calling to want to work with people. And so I started working with myself, going to groups that were Gestalt and bioenergetic oriented. And not only were they helpful and insightful, but they worked through the body. They were embodied. And after learning this, I said, okay, I'm back on track. This is how I want to serve people and work with people and help them not just solve intellectual issues, but get into their body and feel that sense of joy in living. Experience what it is that can take them into fight, flight, and freeze versus what can take them into more resourceful, joyful way of living. And since it worked for me, and since that is what turned my crank, that's what I wanted to give to people. And it started out with bioenergetics, because Alexander Lowen, the founder of bioenergetics, knew the importance of breath because he worked with the body. And he knew that you can do all sorts of exercises, you can do all sorts of analysis, and if you weren't breathing, you were jamming up the works. And so we even had a breathing stool that you lean back over to open up your chest. And Actually, Alexander Lowen's work is some that I have continued throughout my breathwork career, because not only did he teach about breathing, but he taught that there wasn't a one size breath for all.
Yeah.
For example, the way Anne breathes and the way Sue breathes are different because their body themes are different. The way Jim breathes is different than either of them because his body theme is different. And so he looked at the developmental stages of our life and the themes that we took on in those stages and how it affected our breathing. So in helping people breathe, it's not like, well, all you just need to loosen up a little bit and breathe more and everything is fine. That's a good place to start. But as we got more refined into it, and what I love the science about it is that you have to really listen and be with people in their bodies and listen to themes that will give you clues as to what their strengths are and what their limitations are. And then help them become aware of those strengths and limitations and how to increase the strengths with their free breathing and decrease the limitations. So that's the snapshot there of my life work.
That's
and
beautiful.
I've taken this into business, and we'll talk more about that.